When the lawyer said my Aunt Margaret had left her entire estate to her dog, I thought I'd misheard him. The words didn't feel real. They just hung there. To my beloved Pomeranian Mr. Fluff, I leave the entirety of my estate. $7.4 million. Her mansion, her classic car, her jewelry, everything, to a dog. The room, silent for a beat, suddenly burst into laughter. Ava's high-pitched giggle cut through the air like glass. Derek leaned back in his chair, actually clapping. "You've got to be kidding me," he said, laughing so hard he snorted. I sat there, frozen. My hands clenched into fists in my lap, nails digging into my skin. I stared straight ahead, blinking rapidly, like if I kept my eyes open long enough, reality would shift. Ava turned to me, smirking. "Well, I guess Fluffy appreciated her more than you did." Her voice dripped with fake sweetness. I didn't even look at her. My heart pounded in my chest. My throat tightened. This woman, my Aunt, Margaret, had raised me. After my mom died, it was Aunt Margaret who stepped in. She was more than a guardian. She was home. She taught me how to braid my hair, how to stand up for myself, how to not let people walk all over me. And in her final days, I was the one there. Every appointment, every whispered request in the middle of the night. I held her hand when she cried. I fed her when her hands trembled too much to hold a spoon. Ava and Derek, they showed up for Christmas. Occasionally, usually empty-handed, always with an eye on the silverware. And now they were laughing because she left everything to a Pomeranian. My eyes burned, but I refused to cry, not in front of them. Mr. Henley, the lawyer, kept his face blank, but I could see the shift in his posture, shoulders tense, eyes flicking toward me. He continued reading like nothing was wrong, but I wasn't hearing the words anymore. My ears were ringing. My skin felt hot, like every pore had opened in panic. Why would she do this? Why would Aunt Margaret, my Aunt Margaret, leave everything to a dog? Was I that easy to forget? Ava leaned over, whispering something to Derek, and they both chuckled again. He pulled out his phone, probably to start listing the house online or something. That's when the memory hit me. It was 2 weeks before she died. Aunt Margaret had been having a good day, clear-eyed, her voice stronger than it had been in weeks. We sat in the garden, lavender blooming, the air cool and quiet. She reached out, gently took my hand, and said, "Emily, I need you to keep something for me." She handed me a cream-colored envelope, thick, sealed. Her name scribbled across the front in her familiar, careful handwriting. "I updated my will," she said. "It's different now. Just open it if anything feels off." Back in the office, my pulse jumped. I reached into my bag, brushing past my keys, my wallet, until I felt it. The envelope. Untouched since that day. I stood up, my voice low but steady. "There's another will." The laughter died instantly. Derek's smirk vanished. Ava stiffened. All eyes turned to me. My fingers trembled as I held it out. This one was signed 2 weeks before she died. You might be wondering how something like this even happens, how a woman who meant everything to me could leave it all to a dog. But before I get to what happened next in that cold little office, I need to tell you who Aunt Margaret really was, and who she was to me. After my mom died when I was 9, there weren't many people stepping up to raise an awkward, grief-stricken little girl. My dad had long since vanished from the picture. Relatives shrugged, sent flowers, moved on. But Aunt Margaret, she drove 6 hours the next morning and never left. She didn't ask for custody. She just took care of me. Quietly. Fiercely. She wasn't the warm and cuddly type. Aunt Margaret had this elegant, intimidating kind of grace, always in silk robes and red lipstick by 7 a.m., like she was waiting for a Vogue photographer to show up unannounced. But under all that, she had the softest heart of anyone I've ever known. She was the only person who really saw me. We weren't just aunt and niece. We were something messier, deeper. She was the only mother I really remembered. And I wasn't just a houseguest or obligation. I was hers. When I moved back in 3 years ago, after her first fall, she said, "You don't need to stay, Emily." But I could tell she wanted me to. And the truth is, I wanted to be there. Her days were quieter then, but I filled them with warmth. We baked old recipes from her childhood, watched British murder mysteries, and took slow walks through her garden when the weather was good. And Mr. Fluff? He was her baby. That little Pomeranian had more outfits than I did, and a pearl-studded leash. I used to joke that he was her third child after Ava and Derek, except Ava and Derek never called. They only showed up when they wanted something, always with that phony charm and crocodile tears. Margaret saw through it. She'd raise an eyebrow every time they left and say, "Vultures, those two." But still, they were family. I watched her health decline slowly, first her balance, then her memory. But even at her weakest, she was still sharp, still her. There were nights when I'd find her standing in the kitchen, confused, staring at the light switch like it was a stranger. And then there were others where she'd tell me old stories from the 70s, sipping tea like nothing had changed. I was the one who picked up her prescriptions, who helped her bathe when her legs wouldn't hold her anymore. I stayed up with her during the worst nights, just holding her hand and humming lullabies she used to sing to me. So when she passed, I expected grief. I expected heartbreak. But betrayal? Not from her. That will, the one naming Mr. Fluff as her heir, it felt like a slap across the face, like someone had rewritten our story without telling me. But in the moment I reached into my bag and pulled out that second envelope, the memory of that day in the garden played so clearly in my mind, I could smell the lavender again. She had looked at me with absolute clarity, her voice steady. "This one feels right, Emily. Keep it safe." And I had, because I trusted her, because she trusted me. So when I stood up in that room and held out the second will, I wasn't just honoring her wishes. I was defending the truth of who we were to each other. And the look on Ava's face when she realized it, that was just the beginning. Mr. Henley took the envelope from my hands like it was a live grenade. He studied the seal first, his brows narrowing ever so slightly. Then the date. His eyes flicked up to meet mine, and for the first time since this whole circus began, I saw something shift in his expression. Not skepticism, not doubt, recognition. He cleared his throat, adjusting his glasses, and set the envelope gently on the table in front of him. "This appears to be a later version," he said carefully. "I'll need a moment to examine it." Ava sat up straighter in her seat. "Wait, what is that?" Derek scoffed. "She's bluffing. That's probably a grocery list." Their casual arrogance scraped at something deep inside me. They really thought this was a game. I didn't say a word. I just kept my eyes on Mr. Henley, heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. He took out the contents, 2 sheets of thick paper, creased but crisp. He read quietly to himself, lips pressed into a thin line. The silence in the room felt suffocating. I could feel Ava's eyes burning into the side of my face. Derek had stopped leaning back now. He was hunched forward, eyes darting between the will and the lawyer, and all I could think was, please, let this be real. Not because I wanted the money, not even the house, but because if this new will wasn't valid, if I had misremembered, misunderstood, misread her, then it would feel like I had lost her all over again. Mr. Henley finally looked up. His voice was low but firm. "This document is dated 2 weeks after the original. It's properly notarized. Signed. Witnessed." Ava's mouth dropped open. "What?" she said, her voice cracking on the word. No. She wasn't thinking straight by then. She couldn't have understood what she was doing. But I saw the flicker of panic behind her eyes, the way her polished nails started drumming against the table. Derek was silent now, jaw clenched so tight I thought he might crack a molar. "Let's not jump to conclusions," he said slowly, trying to reel it in. "Aunt Margaret was confused at the end. I mean, come on, she was leaving everything to a dog 5 minutes ago, and now suddenly it's Emily. That doesn't make any sense." That was the moment something snapped in me. I turned to face him, calm, measured, but shaking inside. She wasn't confused when she asked me to sit beside her in the garden. She wasn't confused when she told me to keep that envelope safe. She was clear, Derek, and she knew exactly what she was doing. My voice didn't rise, but it cut through the room like a blade, because I had nothing to prove and everything to protect. Mr. Henley nodded, folding the documents back up. We'll have to pause the distribution process until we process this updated version, but as of now, this is the most recent legal record of her wishes. Ava stood up so fast her chair screeched against the floor. This is insane. She barely even liked you. I met her eyes, calm, unshaken. She loved me. I could feel it in my chest, in the way she had said goodbye without ever saying the word, in the way she'd slipped that envelope into my hand with such quiet certainty. The room was still, thick with tension, and for the first time in years, maybe ever, Ava and Derek didn't have anything to say. Not yet. The meeting ended in silence. No one spoke as Mr. Henley carefully packed up the second will, tucking it back into his briefcase like it was a sacred text. Ava stormed out first, her heels clicking furiously across the marble floor. Derek followed a beat later, his face red and unreadable. I stayed seated. My body felt like stone, every limb heavy with adrenaline and disbelief. It wasn't over yet, not even close. But for the first time since Aunt Margaret died, I didn't feel powerless. Still, the weight of what had just happened sat heavily on my chest. As the office door closed behind the others, Mr. Henley looked at me, really looked. He gave a slow, almost imperceptible nod. "She was very clear, Emily," he said softly, more lucid than I'd seen her in months. She knew what she wanted. I swallowed hard. "Did she tell you anything else?" He hesitated. "Only that this wasn't about punishing anyone. It was about rewarding someone who loved her without asking for anything back." My throat tightened. I nodded, stood up, and walked out of that office into a world that felt completely different than the one I'd walked into an hour earlier. The sky had clouded over, soft gray light spreading across the city like a veil. I pulled my coat tighter, the chill finally sinking into my skin. My fingers still trembled slightly, like they hadn't caught up to the shift that had just happened. I knew what came next. There would be pushback, challenges, arguments, maybe even a court date. Ava and Derek weren't the type to walk away quietly, not when there was money on the line, but I wasn't scared of them anymore. That night, I went home to the house I'd shared with Aunt Margaret, the house that now felt both sacred and haunting. Mr. Fluff padded over to me as I opened the front door, his tiny tail wagging like nothing in the world had changed. I scooped him up, resting my forehead gently against his soft fur. "Looks like it's just us now," I whispered. I spent the evening digging through paperwork, reading every document Aunt Margaret had left behind. I found notes in the margins of old medical forms, her sharp looping script on Post-its stuck to folders. Call Dr. Lynn for Emily. Order more of her favorite tea. Even in her final months, she was still thinking of me, and tucked into her nightstand drawer in a lavender-scented envelope was a letter. My name written across the front in her handwriting. I opened it slowly, my hands trembling again, but this time not from fear. Inside, just a single page, no flowery language, no long goodbyes. Just this. "My dearest Emily, you gave me dignity, joy, and love when I had nothing left to offer. You were my home. This is not a gift. It is a reflection of what was always yours. Love, Margaret." I didn't realize I was crying until the ink blurred. This wasn't about a house, or money, or some over-pampered Pomeranian. This was about what we had, what we were. That night, I made a decision. I wouldn't let them erase me from her story. I wouldn't let them twist this into something ugly. If they wanted a fight, fine, but I'd show up with more than just a will. I'd show up with the truth. Because when someone gives you that kind of love, you protect it, no matter what it takes. 2 weeks later, I found myself back in that same cold conference room, same high-backed leather chairs, same ticking clock on the wall. But this time, everything felt different. I wasn't shaking anymore. I wasn't the invisible caregiver in the corner. I was the woman Aunt Margaret chose. Ava and Derek sat across from me, dressed like they were going to a funeral, which, in a way, they were. The death of their expectations, the burial of every entitled dream they'd built around Margaret's money. Ava was stone-faced, but her leg bounced under the table. Derek was quieter than I'd ever seen him, tapping his pen against a closed legal pad like he had something clever to say, but no script for how to say it. Mr. Henley cleared his throat and opened the meeting with the calm efficiency of a man who'd seen more than his fair share of family drama. I've reviewed the updated will, as well as the documentation provided by the witnesses and medical professionals present at the time of its signing. He looked up, gaze moving across each of us. There is no legal basis for contesting it. Ava shot up from her seat. She wasn't in her right mind. She thought Mr. Fluff was her husband for 2 days last month. She had good days, I said quietly, cutting her off. You wouldn't know that because you weren't there. My voice didn't rise, but it echoed. I felt it. Everyone did. She knew exactly what she was doing when she handed me that envelope. She was clear, focused, and tired of pretending that occasional holiday visits meant you deserved a single inch of her life. Derek slammed his palm against the table. You manipulated her. Mr. Henley raised a hand. Enough. The documents are legally binding. The will leaves the estate in its entirety to Ms. Emily Carter. Silence. Ava's face crumbled for a brief second before she caught herself, smoothing the mask back on. So, that's it? She just hands everything over to her little pet project and we're supposed to smile and walk away? You don't have to smile, I said, meeting her eyes. You just have to leave. It wasn't vengeance. It wasn't even victory. It was truth. It was closure. Mr. Henley slid a folder toward me. There are a few final documents you'll need to sign to begin the transition. I'll have the keys delivered to you tomorrow morning. I nodded quietly. My fingers brushed the folder, but I didn't open it yet. Ava stood stiffly, gathering her purse like she might fling it across the room. She stared at me one last time, searching for something. Guilt, doubt, weakness. I gave her nothing. She and Derek turned and walked out. No words, no fight left in them, just the bitter taste of a story that hadn't gone their way. As the door closed behind them, a strange silence settled over the room. Mr. Henley looked at me again, this time not as a lawyer, but as someone who'd just watched a storm pass. She made the right choice, he said softly. I didn't respond. I just sat there for a moment, eyes wet, heart aching in that strange, beautiful way grief does when it's wrapped in love. It wasn't about the house, or the money, or even the will. It was about knowing that, in the end, she saw me. She chose me. And I had honored her, exactly the way she deserved. The house was quiet. Too quiet. It had been 2 days since the final meeting, but everything still felt surreal. I walked through the room slowly, like I was stepping into someone else's memory. The sunlight filtered through the lace curtains just the way it used to, casting soft patterns across the hardwood floors. Mr. Fluff trotted behind me with his usual pomp, tail bouncing like he hadn't noticed the shift in the world. Maybe he hadn't, or maybe he had, and just knew it was safe now. I stopped in the doorway of Aunt Margaret's study. It still smelled faintly of her. Rose perfume and old books. Her teacup still sat on the edge of her desk. A ring of dried lavender leaves settled at the bottom. I picked it up, ran my thumb along the handle, and let myself feel it all. The grief, the love, the weight of everything she left behind. It would have been so easy to reduce this to numbers, estates, trusts, property. But none of that was what mattered. What mattered was her, and what we had. I didn't win anything. I was chosen. And that distinction makes all the difference. I spent the following week writing thank you notes to the nurses who helped us through the final months, organizing donations to the local shelter where Margaret used to volunteer, and creating a space in the garden she loved so much. A small bench, her name carved into the wood, surrounded by the lavender she adored. Sometimes I sit there in the mornings with Mr. Fluff in my lap, tea in hand, and just listen. To the birds, to the breeze, to the quiet. I think about how easy it would have been to stay silent in that moment, back in the lawyer's office, to swallow my pain and let them walk all over her memory. But I didn't, because I knew who she was, and I knew who I was to her. We don't always get to say goodbye the way we want. Sometimes people leave without answers or explanations or apologies. But if we're lucky, really lucky, we get a moment of clarity. We get to know we were loved. That's what she gave me. Not the house, not the money, but the certainty that I mattered to her. And in a world where people are so quick to forget the quiet ones, that certainty is everything. Ava and Derek never reached out again. I didn't expect them to. Part of me even hoped they'd try to fight it, so I could look them in the eyes and defend her all over again. But they didn't. They faded, like background noise that had finally stopped humming. And the quiet? It felt like peace. If you're watching this and you've ever felt overlooked, if you've ever shown up for someone, given them your time, your heart, your whole self, and felt like it didn't matter, please know this: it matters. Even if no one claps for you, even if there's no spotlight. Sometimes love is quiet. Sometimes it's in teacups and lavender and handwritten envelopes no one else ever sees. But it's real, and it's enough. She saw me. She chose me. And in the end, I chose her right back. So, that's my story. It's not just about inheritance or unexpected twists. It's about love, loyalty, and standing up for the quiet truth when no one else will. If this story moved you or reminded you of someone you've loved and lost, please take a second to let me know in the comments. I read every single one. And if you believe in stories that matter, real, human, heartfelt stories, go ahead and give this video a like, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe to the channel for more. There are so many stories like this out there, and I promise I'm just getting started. Thanks for being here. And thank you, Aunt Margaret.